here with the Catch Wrestling Alliance, and we keep real wrestling alive with your support. So thank you very much for watching or listening. We're also available in podcast format if you didn't know that. And if you've only discovered us through the podcast, then you can also watch this live stream on Twitch or YouTube, whatever is most convenient for you. Just letting you guys know that we're available on these different platforms. All right. So let me give you a little bit of background about myself before we get into the subject. Because the subject is big athletes versus small athletes. And I think maybe not for some higher level athletes, but I think just the vibe in general seems to be people think of like the larger athlete. So like the big guys are definitely gonna smash a little guy. Um, Actually, kind of reminds me of one Bugs Bunny cartoon, this really old one where um, Bugs Bunny has to go up against the world champion wrestler at that time, professional wrestler, and the guy is huge, and his name is the Crusher, and but of course, Bugs Bunny is small and skinny, and he is able to outwit the pro wrestler and win, right? So anyway, that's a cartoon, but it kind of shows kind of the theme of what I'm going to be talking about today, where oftentimes it's not what people believe it is, where with regards to catch wrestling specifically, where in a way like size isn't the end all be all. Yes, you do want to be strong, you want to take care of yourself. Um, so, um, just make sure that you're fit, right? But once you're fit and you have skill, a lot of times it is the implementation of your skill and your strategies that really help you to win, regardless of how big or small you are, right? So, let's go ahead and give some examples from history. So, a lot of the wrestlers from Wigan back in the day, right? So 1800s and early 1900s were smaller guys. Like they weren't like these 6 foot guys. They were actually we consider like more like 5'6", or like these uh, kind of average. I don't say average. I don't know. It depends on your country what average height is, but they weren't particularly tall or particularly strong. Same thing even with Frank Gotch and Farmer Burns and all that. Like even though they were competing at heavyweight, so heavyweight was lighter back in those days. Or it was just over a certain amount of weight. So you have like a guy like Farmer Burns, who was probably more like your average looking, uh, like kind of skinny farm guy. And he was going up against guys much larger than himself and beating them, like pinning them, winning against them. And they were much more muscled, taller. And so that shows that like with superior intellect and a superior strategy and the implementation of those strategies and techniques, that the smaller person can win, right? So what do we like where can we go from here with regards to helping you to understand this notion is like there's different things, right? And one of the things that is kind of jumping to my mind is the one thing that my good buddy John Strickland on the East Coast wrote or said about catch wrestling. You want to think about like with regards to like you, and then when you're looking at your opponent, it's not necessarily you going up against their size, right? Their mass. But you can think it's like you can put it simply where it's like your body going up against one of their limbs, right? So you can start controlling maybe their arm, or you can start trying to control a leg. Um, and so you're not necessarily going to try to uh, grab the bull by the horn, so as they say, right? Because that's going to be difficult, right? If you try to say like keeping with the bull analogy, it's much more difficult to control a bull by grabbing it around the waist, right? Because you can't even close your hands around a large animal like a bull or a cow, right? Um, so how can you somewhat control them, right? Is usually by getting the smaller parts. Yeah, sometimes, yeah, maybe you can maybe you can grab the horns and twist them around, but it's not necessarily the best thing to be doing. And actually, I saw a lot of like in China when I was there. There was one region where they do their version of bullfights, where instead of having a human fight a bull, they actually allow two bulls to go at it, and then whichever bull backs off first that's the loser. Right, so they headbutt a few times, and then one gets scared and kind of backs off, and then they declare the other one the winner, the one that didn't back off. Right, but then when the owner of the bull has to get control of the bull, right? So then, because they want to take it out of the arena, all they do is actually they wrap some rope around one of the legs, and so that the bull just doesn't run away or whatever. And so it's kind of getting to my point where it's like they're able to regain control of the bull by just the one limb, right? So that's kind of one analogy where it's actually an animal one, but same idea when you're competing or grappling. Um, you can more easily control someone not by grabbing them around the waist and trying to suplex them, because even when you see freestyle wrestling or Greco-Roman wrestling, if when they do those kinds of things, and maybe they'll get a big suplex or whatever, when the person falls down, and if they have their hands and legs unrestrained, then they have a lot of strategy. They can pop back up, or in the case of freestyle, then they tend to pancake out, like they flatten themselves out. Um, but anyway, it's like if it was an MMA situation, right? Then and their arms are unrestrained. They're going to try to do some reversal. They might try to stand back up. They might try to do some kind of submission counter to you if your arm is like if your arms are around their waist. Or there's plenty of incidents, like a really famous one that involved Sakuraba, right? He against Henzo. Henzo was kind of behind him, and then Sakuraba was able to secure the double wrist lock position, and ultimately he broke Henzo Gracie's arm that way. So that's one of the reasons why you don't necessarily want to be attacking the whole body, right? So usually, if you want to, and especially if you're the smaller person, but this really goes for everybody. It's like you're not going to um, go for the biggest part. You can start breaking them down into little component parts and attacking those, because your entire body against the arm, so kind of like an arm bar, is going to be more successful than you trying to just grab someone and suplex them until they get knocked out or something like that. Excuse me, I think I got to clear my throat. All right, so that's kind of one of the things I really like the way John Strickland put it about that, where it's like think about your body against one of their limbs. I do think that's kind of the way to implement this kind of idea, where it's like if you're the smaller person, don't necessarily worry so much about like going up against a larger person, right? A lot of times it's just about staying calm, trying to break that other person down to component parts. One of the things that I would kind of, or one of the analogies that I used in my mind, like when I was younger, I enjoyed playing that game Tetris. So I tried to, um, I didn't try, it just kind of came out where when I was competing, whether and a long time ago I competed more in kickboxing and stuff. So um, I would just kind of associate the opponent's body as like those different pieces in Tetris, and then so I wouldn't necessarily try to get intimidated by the person in front of me, especially if they want to try and knock me out, right? So I wouldn't necessarily get scared by that. So I tried to break it down to these component parts, these pieces coming at me, and I would be able to move around the shapes that are coming towards me, and then I can try to find I can fit into the spaces that are available to me, or manipulate some of these shapes that are coming at me. So I'm not thinking about the scary, intimidating, roided out. I don't know if they're all on roids or whatever. Just kidding, but um, so there's different aspects. So the mental aspect that can play a part as well, where you gotta kind of break the person down to kind of like the component parts, so you can better uh, gain the advantage over these component parts, and not the entirety of a person, right? So kind of going back to that whole bull analogy, it's like some people are strong, right? And especially if they're competitors, and they're doing all the strength and conditioning stuff, they're going to resist you with a lot of force, right? And so you don't want to be resisting them with all your force, because you're going to get tired, right? So it's better if if you're sparring with someone, or you're in a match with someone, if you feel like they are using a lot of force against you, let them, right? Let them get tired, right? Especially the longer the round or the match is, just let them use that force, and you can kind of then take advantage once you recognize that they are tired, right? And plus, going back to the whole idea of smaller versus larger. So say, like, I don't know if you saw the thumbnail for this particular video. It should be available. If you see on our YouTube channel, the thumbnail for this is a really cool image of Farmer Burns. He's sparring, or basically he got hired to do the strength and conditioning for this one boxer called Jim Jeffries. His name was Jim Jeffries, and he actually was a retired boxer, but they brought him out of retirement to fight against Jack Johnson. It's unfortunate. It's a kind of unfortunate history, um, because Jack Johnson, who was black, he was the boxing champion, and people really wanted to have a white champion, so they brought a former champion out of retirement to fight against him, to hopefully beat him, right? And so, but anyway, Jim Jeffries was the guy that they hoped would win. So that's why we have that whole that notion of great white hope, right? So I don't know if you might have heard that that because it still gets used, and um, so anyway, they hired Farmer Burns to be his strength and conditioning coach. But either way, you can see in the picture that Jim Jeffries was much larger than Farmer Burns. There's some other cool pictures of them in a ring sparring to try to get Jim Jeffries back into shape, because he had already retired, and so he actually was um, like way overweight and stuff. So they were able to get his weight down and get him back into fighting shape. He still lost, but you can see someone smaller. So Farmer Burns probably could just destroy Jim Jeffries in a wrestling match, like no problem. But that shows like the technique, the experience. So it doesn't matter that Farmer Burns was like much smaller, much like scrawnier, less muscled. Um, it doesn't matter. I'm sure, like we know that we know that Burns could totally dismantle Jim Jeffries, like without even thinking about it. And the guy was much bigger. We have all kinds of even on some of our matches, and this is what people should kind of take into consideration. A lot of times, catch wrestling matches, especially back like in England and stuff, and even a lot of these. Um, visits, like tours that say like Farmer Burns would do. One of the ways he made a lot of money was to actually go to different like mining camps or work camps, and then people would wager, like for they would wager to see who would win these these wrestling matches that would take place in the camps and stuff. So same thing in England. Um, there was a lot of, it was like Wigan was a mining town, um, and so people would wager. They would spend, for entertainment and stuff, and they would wager to see who would win these different wrestling matches. And but the thing is, it's like oftentimes there wasn't like weight divisions. It wasn't like tournaments. It was one coach thinking that their wrestler was so skilled, so good that they could take out the other coach's wrestler. And so then they would put money on it, and so it wasn't necessarily a weight thing or weight division thing. So that's kind of the history there. So I think it's more of like a modern thing where we are, like say like in MMA or all kinds of competitive sports. We have these weight divisions and stuff, to kind of try to make things more fair, but it wasn't always like that. Okay. All right. Seems like a bunch of questions are piling up here. So let's go ahead and start getting to it. Uh, hello, Mazahira. Thank you for watching. Um, Mazahira asked if I love metal music. Yeah. And I like a lot of different styles of music. So yeah, there's a lot of different bands I like. Taquero Man. Did old school catch wrestlers compete with shoes, or were some athletes barefoot? Um, it was primarily shoes. But you'll see some pictures where guys are training at least without shoes. WP conditioning, technique, and strategy will always overcome size. Yep, that's really a great way to look at it. Um, if you can, but then that was one of the strategies, especially since catch wrestling didn't have time limits. Then you can, especially if someone's coming at you with full force, just let them. Really, just if you have enough strategy to, be able to withstand their force, they're going to tire themselves out, and then you can more easily control them later. Mazahira, they use they used to catch wrestle with shoes. I think he's just replying to that. Yes, shoes, wrestling shoes, and that's one of the reasons why we still have wrestling shoes today in like the Olympics and stuff. Taquero Man, did bodybuilding or strength training play a role in catch wrestling? What balance do you recommend for conditioning and grappling? Yes, and I believe even there was a lot of influence from the Indians in um, their kind of strength and conditioning approach. And even if, like say, even in England, they'll talk about, or they'll call some things like Indian whatever, like uh, I think like Indian crawl. So I think what in the United States we call it duck walks. Um, and so that's like when you're practicing your double leg takedown, and you can make it into a solo drill where you kind of you're kneeling and you're kind of going kneeling down on one leg, and then you can kind of walk across the mat that way, and you're basically doing the movement for the double leg over and over again, but you're just doing it by yourself, and it's often a warm up. There's also a lot of other things where it has Indian in the name, at least when they use it in England. So that is a very good sign that they got it directly from what they were seeing, especially like the Kushti wrestlers doing. So hopefully that answers your question. But yeah, you definitely want to be in excellent shape. Strength and conditioning should be of the utmost importance. Um, so there are some people that, or even some of the old time wrestlers that say like, "Oh, wrestling is the best strength and conditioning you can do for wrestling." But what does the science say? Yes, it's part of it, but yeah, you have to be supplementing with well balanced strength and conditioning routine that will dramatically improve your cardio and minimize your chance for injury. So yeah, you got to be doing that. Mazahira, I think bodybuilding and strength training both work. Yes. So and there's different modes of training. So you can work on your muscle endurance and all that. So um, if you can find a really good strength and conditioning coach, I think that'll help. Taquero Man 91. where does the balance with aggression and technique play a role in grappling? Well, the thing is, you don't necessarily want to be uh, like you can be aggressive and kind of like imposing your will and all that, um, but you don't want to tire yourself out. So you don't want to gas out. That's the main thing. That's the main problem. So if you can get past the nerves, right, to the mental aspect, sometimes the mental aspect can tire you out if you get so stressed out, right, or so much anxiety that you get so worked up that when you're actually in there, you feel like you have no energy whatsoever. So if you can get past that, then also you also want to try to get used to not, we say, like gassing out. So again, that shows like like there's a lot of components that go into it where you can have enough gas in the gas tank that if you overcome the mental aspect, that you can then implement your strategy. You can then like withstand some of their aggression or their pushback or their resistance to your implementation of your techniques and your strategy. So having that good solid base of like so that good gas tank, that good strength and conditioning under you, then you can withstand a lot, and chances are you can like outlast a really kind of like equally skilled opponent. So hopefully that answers your question. It's like so if you want to be doing like grappling training um, most days of the week, go for it. But you got to be doing some of the cardio and strength training stuff, maybe even 3 times a week or whatever. I mean, with regards to the weight stuff or like that, and then cardio you can do, 5 to 6 days a week actually, because it's so submaximal, what we call submaximal. So it's not, it's exercise for your heart and lungs. Um, so you can do it 5 to 6 days a week. Adriano Ramos, what age did Billy Robinson stop competitive wrestling? Um, I don't know exactly, but he did spend uh, decades doing pro wrestling. So while he didn't necessarily do competitive for the longest time, he still kept active. Taquero Man 91. Uh, how do you create a strategy while in a grappling match? I told you already. I'm just kidding. And a lot of times it could be different. It depends on the person. Right? It depends on the opponent that you have. Um, but a lot of it is goes back to at least stopping what they're doing. So if they come at you quick, or they take you down or whatever, they take you down real quick. Don't worry, don't worry about it, because you have to, or you should have had good training in what we call like the mat wrestling and stuff. So getting that wrist control, getting back to your base. Um, if you get those types of things down, it doesn't matter if someone comes at you real quick, gets you down real quick. Um, you can kind of stop a lot of that, or at least start slowing down a lot of their attack, and so that you can counter and then implement your game plan. Right. So a lot of it is that like actually risk control is a major thing. So if you can work on, if you can start with trying to get that risk control going, maybe that can be a good place to start. Like if you're like now, so Taquero Man, since you asked that question, when you spar, start with trying to control the other person. Like when you're sparring in the gym, and see where that leads you. Or if you have a training partner that like comes at you really fast and takes you down really fast, see how quickly you can try to regain some of the at least risk control, right? And see and let that like discover how you can actually stop a lot of their submission attempts, just by doing that, just by keeping control of even one wrist. Okay, so I think that could be like one strategy you can apply while you're grappling, like while in the gym with your training partner, and then see what develops, and then maybe later if you have a competition or whatever, then you can see where that like you can then implement some of these ideas. Like I was talking to one of my training partners the other week, um, because this one guy is really really good. He's a purple belt in 10th Planet or whatever, uh, and he tries his best to not let me grab him when we spar. Uh, but we were kind of talking about a lot of these jujitsu or like no-gi jujitsu highlight videos that you'll see where like they're showing guys in like these big tournaments, especially like no-gi tournaments, and like a lot of these famous or a lot of people who are famous in grappling, um, when they're doing these highlight moves, a lot of times the opponent, even if they're kind of well known, it's like they're not even going for wrist control. So they're basically allowing the other person to just dominate them, right? So you'll be surprised at how how much you can stop just by getting wrist control. All right, Taquero Man. To add on to my strategy question, I was wondering if you could turn your brain off, or should you think and plan while you're dealing with your opponent? Um, uh, don't necessarily turn your brain off, but kind of if you can get into the zone, like they call it, right? So that's where you're kind of moving based off what you're feeling, and so your brain is still processing everything, but you're not analyzing it so much. And so like there's a quote from Billy Riley, so like the famous legendary mega coach from the original Snake Pit in Wigan. Like his gym was actually called Riley's Gym, but they later nicknamed it Snake Pit. So he was a coach for Billy Robinson and Carl Estas and Roy Wood and all the other famous guys that that you might have heard of. He said if you're in a match and you think that you're in a situation where you think like, oh, I can do this move, it's already too late to do that move, right? So a lot of it is training, repetition, drills, sparring time, mat time, getting the experience, knowing, and it's kind of like knowing the feeling of when a move is correct. So hopefully that kind of or that's kind of a way to help you to understand where it's like knowing the feeling of when to do a move and not necessarily thinking too much about like, oh, I can do this move now, right? Because if you think that, then I really agree with Billy Riley. If you're thinking that now is the time to do a move, that was the time to do the move, and you're not doing it, or you didn't do it at the proper time, so now it's probably too late, right? The person's already moving, or maybe they've even kind of sensed that you're gonna like what you're trying to set up, right? So they can smell what you're cooking, so then they're already gonna counter or set up. They're gonna start cooking something else, right? So I think that's one of the ways you want to think about it, where it's like remember how it feels to be in a position where you can kind of know where they are. Um, Even and there's a lot of moves, especially in wrestling, where you can kind of uh, know where they are without being able to see them. Like in wrestling, we're fine if someone uh, like takes our back because there's so many like escapes and stuff. Um, so because we kind of know where they are, you can kind of sense where they are. So then it's really easy to counter. And so then when you feel that the time is right to do your counter move, then you do it in the proper time. Yeah. All right. Taquero Man, thanks for the wrist control tip. You're welcome. Yeah, brain off, zone, flow state. That's what I meant. Yep, exactly. And actually, I have an interview with this one of my colleagues who's a psychiatrist talking about flow states, and that should be on one of our playlists on our channel. You can check it out. It's me and you can see a picture of me and a woman that is Dr. Meredith Sagan, and she's a really well known and really successful. Necessarily, I don't want to say successful like thinking like money or anything like that, but successful at treating patients, um, all kinds of patients, from prisons to to the affluent, helping them with their mental situations. So really cool. So yeah, go and check out her. We do 3 videos together, and that's on our channel, and there should be a playlist. I think the playlist for a lot of these interviews and stuff like that. So make sure you check that out because she's really brilliant. All right, Adriano Ramos. That's a great tip. Cool. I'm happy to help out. Is catch wrestling really physical chess? Really, like all martial arts are like that, but um, all combat sports, because it's really two brains kind of going up against each other. Your brain's like the command center, right? So, and your body is the troops, right? So, if you want to think less militaristically, then you can think your brain is the conductor and your body is the orchestra, right? So you're creating beautiful music, right? And your music is gonna counter their cacophony of their bad sounding music, right? So that's one way you can think about it. But the one thing about pure or like authentic catch wrestling is kind of going back to the idea where there's no time limits. So then strategies can change, right? So no points, no time limits. So who cares if someone takes you down? If you're really good at mat wrestling, right? So if you're really good at wrestling, once you've been taken down, there's really nothing to worry about. Go ahead and let them take you down. You can slow down their progression. Um, you can slow down their attack, right? And hopefully you can then overcome their attack, wear them down, allow them to just gas themselves out. Then you can more easily take control, get that pin or the submission hold, right? So that that in a way I believe kind of sets catch wrestling apart. And I mentioned this in another talk where it's like a long time ago. I think the first time that I trained in Wigan and I did a competition for them uh, beforehand. Coach Roy Wood told us that this is the closest thing we can get to a real fight. And I think some people would say that like, oh well, like MMA is probably the closest you can get to a real fight because you can punch and kick and stuff. But just think about it. So MMA has a ref that will break up the action, right? If nothing's really happening, they'll stand you both up, or separate you, or reset you, or if you happen to be grabbing the cage, they'll hit your hands so you stop grabbing the cage. So in catch wrestling, well, then also MMA has rounds, right? So in catch wrestling, there's no rounds. The ref is just there to mark a pin, right? To make sure that you actually pin that person for the proper amount of time, or just to make sure that you guys ultimately stay safe. All right. So like if someone is tapping out, that they stop the match. And that's pretty much it, right? So you if you're getting smashed and you are not tapping out, then the ref's not going to do anything, and you have to get yourself out. So in that way, it can be more realistic than like an MMA match. Right. So in that way, it's like, so like like how people always try to say like, well, on the street there's no ref and there's no whatever. So in catch wrestling, it's basically that way as well. Um, you can get beat all over the area, all over the competition area, and no one's really going to stop it unless you tap out or get pinned. All right. Let me see. Taquero Man, do you think training with aggressive competitors is beneficial, or do you think that there's a trade-off of diminishing returns? Um, what you want to do is train with very skilled, like if you can get the most skilled people you can, or if you can train with, say, if you're training with jiu-jitsu people, if you can train with purple belts or higher frequently, great, because chances are they're going to just help you to improve, because they already are beyond the novice stage of learning. So those are probably going to be the people that are going to give you the best, like most rewarding training session. You can do a little bit with some people who do freestyle wrestling and stuff like that, but they just have to be willing to go nonstop. So with jujitsu, at least um, they're used to um, not being stood up so much. So I think that can be a little bit more beneficial, and especially since there are more no-gi competitions around, it's getting even more and more popular every week and stuff. So um, chances are a no-gi competitor will probably be more beneficial for you. All right. What do you think is more important? Grappling, attacking first? Or what do you think is more important in grappling? Attacking first or countering? Depends on the situation, but yeah, go ahead. The main thing is that you're not trying to, or what I see is like, or what I call kind of running away or stalling or whatever. Just as long as like you grab that person, go up to them and touch them, right? So and see what happens, right? So because you'll see sometimes where it's like people are kind of they're starting a match and like they're trying to reach, and then if someone tries to grab them and they try to yank their hand out of the grasp or whatever, uh, I don't think that's proper, right? So it's like you're in a grappling match, so let's get to it. So start grabbing each other and like see what happens. Yeah, so it depends. If they're really aggressive coming at you, hey, go for it. Let's take this to the ground and then see who ends up on top. Is there any good concepts you recommend for solid grappling defense? Yeah, don't let them control your limbs, right? And if you're doing no gi, then uh, no proper choke defense. But yeah, the better you learn what we call mat wrestling, the less you'll get submitted. Also, this is kind of one of the things that Billy Robinson really tried to instill in me, and uh, is that whole idea where it's like if like don't necessarily worry about the takedowns, uh, at least at first, right? The first thing you want to be working on is the mat wrestling. So work on those counters, work on uh, getting off your back, and all these different things that are involved once you get down to the mat. And then later you can work on developing your takedowns, because if you do takedowns first, um, it might be great to get the person down, but if you go up against someone who's good and they counter you, and you end up on the bottom, and you haven't really been drilling all the mat wrestling stuff, you don't know what to do, then you're going to be really stuck. You're going to be really frustrated. And then in future sparring or future matches, you're going to be more scared to attempt your takedown. And the whole idea is not to be scared during your match. So, um, the better you are at the mat wrestling, then you can just jump in and go for like even what the Americans will say, like you can go for a leg dive. Right? So it's almost you can think of it just that simply, where it's like you actually just kind of throw yourself down towards the legs of that person, and who cares if they sprawl, because at least you're already going to the mat, right? So that that can be one of the things where it's like, yeah, you want to be working on the defense, the ground stuff, the mat wrestling, right? So I think in in jujitsu they call it what newaza, right? So all the ground stuff, jujitsu and judo and stuff, they call it newaza, I believe. Um, so the mat wrestling. So in particular, the wrestling, mat wrestling, not so much the jujitsu or judo newaza, but the whole idea of staying off your back, getting all these counters, getting back on top. That is really going to like really going to enhance your your grappling overall, really verily bigly, right? All right, so keep on asking those questions, then we'll get back to, oh yeah, there's another question coming in. So is there any female pioneers when it comes to catch wrestling? Not sure. There were some wrestling shows that had women, but yeah, there's very few. I think unfortunately at that time, like in the back in the day, it was still kind of considered like, oh, this is a man's thing or whatever, which is really unfortunate. So hopefully we can get more women into catch wrestling, and uh, Yeah, because just because like why not? Anybody like we're talking about big versus small. It's like if you have uh, a smaller woman still able to beat a bigger guy, that's great. And it will then, I think it can help to prove the whole idea that it's all about technique and skill and learning and knowing when to implement certain techniques or certain strategies. Um, yeah, so it'll probably shock some, maybe some male chauvinists or whatever. But like who cares? Who cares? It's really, it's a sport. And then when you want to think about the Olympics and stuff like that, it's like one of the criteria for getting your sport into the Olympics is that men and women do it. Right? It's not, they're trying to not be like this like thing where it's like, oh, like we'll let your sport in if you only, if it's like a sport that only allows men to do or only allows women to do. That's not kind of in the spirit of what people are considering to be like the spirit of the Olympics. Even though it's like there's like, well, Greco, I think, I don't even know if that has a women's division. So anyway, it didn't, maybe the Olympics didn't necessarily start like that, but that's kind of the direction they're going. So that's why you're having all these different sports that are being included, is just because they have uh, men and women, a large amount of men and women doing this sport around the world. But so yeah, hopefully we can get more women doing it. Yeah. Did any of you guys watch the video we put out for at least the first video that we put out for Attack on Titan, the counter? Let me know if you guys liked it. Hopefully you guys like it, because we got a couple more coming out for those fights in that anime. Right. So just let me know. Let us know what you think. Uh, Definitely trying to find some more realistic fight scenes. Also, too, there's some really cool. Um, Actually, some speaking of women, there's in one championship, and I think I've told you guys like we'll definitely focus more on showing you fight breakdowns from one championship as opposed to UFC, because one championship is actually okay with us using their video footage. One UFC really does not like that. So it's weird. Like you'll find some videos on YouTube where it's like it shows the majority of the fight, and I don't know why those don't get taken down. But at least my videos, if I put even like a short clip of something that happened in a UFC fight, it's almost inevitable that UFC will try to take my video down. So I have to remove those few seconds. So I just don't even want to deal with it. And I think a lot of the one championship fights are even more interesting. A lot of the one championship fights, fighters have better striking, like anyway, so better striking skills. So, but anyway, there's a match that happened a few weeks ago that has some really cool grappling in it. So we're gonna do a breakdown on that as well coming up, along with a few more Attack on Titan breakdowns as well. Does Bellator, so Takedo Man, does Bellator allow us to use their content? I don't know, actually. I had never tried. Right, so that's kind of funny. Like I guess I don't pay that much attention to Bellator, or at least I don't see the footage floating around as much. But the footage of one championship is, it's all over the place. So like they're on Instagram and YouTube. They put out full fights. So they're really generous on that, and also like you can kind of easily find out like the backgrounds of some of the fighters, like what their fighting styles are. You can do a lot of that stuff. You can find out a lot of that stuff very easily for one championship. All right, so yeah, we have all those different things coming up. You can also help support us by becoming a member of the channel, of this YouTube channel. I think the minimum is like $2 a month. That all really helps. So you definitely want to be getting back to normal, since like in a few days, on the 15th of this month, Los Angeles County will, or I think maybe even the majority of California, will like remove a lot of the COVID mandate stuff. So let's see if we can't get back to having competition. So if you become a member, just know that any contributions you make will be going to like having more competitions. So and anything is appreciated. Adriano Ramos, can you do a video on how to get out of bottom position? Yes, there are several ways, and I've done a few. I did 4 in a row. Of course, it's not every way to get out from bottom, but I did a series of 4, and I made a little playlist of it. So see if you can't find that on our channel. I know we've got a lot of playlists on there, but if you go to our YouTube channel and then you see playlist, if you go to the playlist tab, then you should be able to find, like, I think it's like wrestling from bottom. So there's at least 4 videos in there, and I can try to add more. But if go ahead and if you watch those videos, if you have any additional questions, just let me know, and then we can kind of, if there's some scenario or something that you find yourself in often, then and it's not solved by one of those 4 videos, we can try to we can see what we can do for you, like try to find an answer for you. Taquero man, what are the goals for catch wrestling within the next 5 years? Yeah, just continue doing what we're doing. See if we can't, build up the sport, and especially the authentic version of catch wrestling. I know there's different people doing some kind of make believe version of catch wrestling. So it's unfortunate because, uh, like say, like back in the day, catch wrestling with really strong people with really strong wrestling fundamentals were able to beat a lot of people from different martial arts backgrounds. Um, so that's what we want to do: create really strong uh, catch wrestlers who know the real thing and are able to win against other styles. So if you guys are interested in something like that, and you don't live in LA, or if you don't live in South Carolina, so John Strickland's in South Carolina, I'm here in Los Angeles. If you can't train with either of us, then you can do our Catch Wrestling Alliance Academy. That's on our website. But yeah, feel free to ask questions, especially if you're in the academy, you don't live nearby. Yeah, message me, and then we can still be working on a plan specifically for you. Okay, so I think maybe I've spoken enough this weekend or this week. We're getting ready for the weekend. Thinking about the weekend already is just kind of coming out of my mouth. All right, so thank you for listening. I think we'll go ahead and end this here. So let's try to keep real wrestling alive. Thank you.